Have you ever wondered why so many men, once vibrant, social, and full of life, seem to fade into quiet submission after marriage? The friends vanish, the hobbies disappear, and the spark that once defined them dims into silence. Not because they want to change, but because something changes them. It's easy to laugh at phrases like ball and chain, getting hitched, or taking the plunge. We joke about them at weddings, toss them around like harmless idioms. But what if those words carry a deeper truth? What if they hint at something far more sinister? A transformation not of partnership, but of possession. This isn't about hating marriage. It's about finally seeing the system for what it really is, a structure that praises sacrifice but punishes sovereignty, where love is conditional, freedom is optional, and masculinity is quietly bartered away in the name of duty. But here's the uncomfortable part. Most men don't even realize they're playing a game they were never meant to win. Think about this. Really, think about it. What happens to most men after they say "I do"? Their circle of friends, once a vibrant brotherhood, begins to shrink, sometimes disappearing altogether. Those spontaneous late-night hangouts, road trips with the boys, weekend gym sessions, or even quiet moments spent pursuing hobbies slowly vanish into thin air. And not because the man suddenly stops enjoying those things, but because the world around him begins to redefine what mature and responsible should look like. Before marriage, a man's hobbies are passions, things that make him feel alive, expressive, complete. But after marriage, they're quietly labeled selfish. Unless those interests directly serve the family unit, unless they are repackaged as family time, home improvement, or dad duties, they're dismissed as indulgent distractions. The very outlets that once gave a man identity now seem frivolous, even shameful. And it doesn't stop there. His free time, those sacred, unscheduled moments once filled with possibility, are now absorbed into the endless gravity of household management and domestic obligation, errands, yard work, daycare pickups, assembling furniture, fixing plumbing, paying bills, coordinating calendars. It's a subtle takeover, one task at a time. His money? It transforms too. What was once his paycheck becomes our budget. On paper, that sounds fair. But in reality, the distribution of control shifts. It's often the woman who begins to manage how those resources are allocated, what gets bought, when, and why. His input reduced, his autonomy diluted. And this isn't just some accidental drift into domesticity. No, this is happening by design, not from malicious intent, but from something even deeper evolutionary instinct. You see, women intuitively understand a primal truth. A man's value to the relationship increases when his value outside the relationship decreases. The fewer alternatives he has, the fewer exits, the fewer independent pursuits, the fewer emotional or financial escapes, the more invested he'll become in maintaining what he has. He won't risk what little freedom remains. He won't question the system that quietly binds him. He'll stay, he'll comply, he'll self-regulate, piece by piece, choice by choice. The independent life he once lived gets dismantled until he no longer remembers what freedom felt like. And here's where the system gets brilliantly sinister. It doesn't use force. It uses virtue. It turns his best qualities against him. His desire to be a good husband, his commitment to be a reliable provider, his love for his children. These aren't weaknesses. These are noble impulses, but they become the very chains that tighten around him. Because in this framework, resistance doesn't feel honorable, it feels selfish. Disagreeing feels irresponsible. Saying no feels like betrayal. So what does he do? He complies. He collaborates in his own imprisonment. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But for the modern married man, the most terrifying thing is to realize how completely he's been domesticated." We laugh about marriage all the time, don't we? We call it the ball and chain. We joke that someone's taking the plunge. We say he's getting hitched, as if he's being dragged into something against his will. But pause for a moment. Listen carefully. Why is it that the language surrounding marriage, casual, humorous, culturally accepted, almost always sounds like punishment? It's not coincidence. It's subconscious truth leaking out through satire. Deep down, society understands something that most men are unwilling to face consciously: that marriage, far from being a partnership of equals, is often a system of slow, polite servitude dressed up as love. And the joke is funny, until you realize you're the punchline. Because when a man gets married, something fundamental shifts. His autonomy becomes negotiable. His needs become secondary. And somewhere along the way, he stops being an individual and starts being a function. The worst part, he's expected to be grateful for it. This is where it gets dark. The system doesn't just exploit men, it trains them to thank it for doing so. We've all heard the saying, happy wife, happy life. It's sold as harmless wisdom, some cozy little mantra passed from one man to the next like a life-saving secret. But let's be honest, it's not wisdom, it's psychological programming. That phrase doesn't mean care for your wife and be kind. It means her emotional state is more important than your emotional state. It teaches men that their job is not to be authentic or fulfilled or centered in their own sense of value. No, their job is to regulate her emotions, even if it means suppressing their own. And the implications of that, they're massive. Because once a man internalizes the idea that peace in the home is more important than truth, more important than honesty, more important than his needs, he becomes permanently off balance. He lives in constant emotional debt, where her happiness is the goal, and his happiness is merely a byproduct if he's lucky. It's not partnership, it's servitude with better marketing. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." Think about that. Alone, not isolated, not antisocial, but autonomous. Because the moment a man enters a structure that demands he adapt, silence, and reshape his essence for harmony, he ceases to be himself. He becomes what others need him to be. Marriage. Modern marriage often becomes the gradual process of turning a man into a role: the provider, the problem solver, the protector, but not the person. And the process is so slow, so culturally normalized, that he doesn't even realize it's happening. It begins with small compromises, skipping guy's night to keep the peace, choosing her favorite restaurant instead of yours, deferring to her on social plans, shelving your passion project because it's not the right time. Each decision, in isolation, seems reasonable. It seems kind. It seems mature. But add them together, and you have a man who no longer makes decisions at all. You have a man who reacts, not initiates. A man who filters every thought through one question: will this upset her? That's not leadership. That's not love. That's survival. And the truth society doesn't want you to say out loud, many married men aren't thriving. They're enduring quietly, obediently clinging to the illusion that their sacrifice is noble, when in reality, it's simply expected. It's one of the most painful questions a man can ask himself. Why did she change? The woman he fell in love with, the one who was playful, affectionate, agreeable, eager to connect, gradually transforms into someone colder, more demanding, less interested in intimacy, and far less accommodating. He thinks, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I just need to try harder. communicate more, be more attentive. But what if the shift isn't about him at all? What if the transformation isn't personal? It's biological. Here's the harsh truth. Most men are never told. The change in your wife wasn't a choice. It was a response. During the courtship phase, a woman is unconsciously motivated to secure long-term commitment and resources. Evolution shaped this behavior across millions of years, when survival depended on bonding with a reliable mate. So what does she do? She maximizes her appeal. Frequent sex, shared interests, playfulness, patience, minimal demands, maximum agreeability. She becomes, without even realizing it, the perfect partner. And she does it with sincerity, because at that moment she means it. But once the commitment is secured, once the ring is on the finger, the home is shared. The children begin to arrive. Her biological priorities shift. Now the goal is no longer attraction, it's optimization. Her subconscious mind starts asking, how can this arrangement serve me best? How can I extract the most support, protection, and provision possible for myself and the children's sex? Once an organic expression of desire becomes a tool, a reward for good behavior, a bargaining chip, shared interests fade if they don't contribute to the family's logistics. Demands increase, patience decreases. The warmth, once so freely given, becomes a commodity you must earn. And no, this isn't conscious manipulation. It's not cruelty. It's evolutionary programming. Just as men are wired to be drawn toward youth, beauty, and fertility qualities that signal reproductive value, women are wired to seek and secure resources, commitment, and long-term security. It's nature, not nurture. But here's where things go horribly wrong for men, because men are taught to believe that women love them for who they are, for their personality, their presence, their soul. The brutal reality: your wife's love is conditional. Not because she's a bad person, but because evolution made it conditional. Her affection is tied directly to your utility, how much you provide, how stable you are, how reliable you continue to be as a resource, financial, emotional, logistical. And when that utility begins to fade, when you lose your job, suffer health issues, fall into depression, or simply become too familiar, the emotional bond often begins to deteriorate, not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly, until it disappears. And the data doesn't lie. Women initiate 70–80% of divorces. Why? Not necessarily because they're unhappy, but because they believe they can get a better outcome elsewhere, or because they've already extracted the maximum value from the arrangement. It's not about good or bad. It's about cost-benefit analysis. And when the math no longer favors the marriage, she leaves. But it doesn't end there. Even after she walks away, the system ensures that her benefits continue. Alimony, child support, asset division. You, the man, continue to fund a structure you no longer live in. You keep paying, but the door is locked behind you. That's not just economic exploitation. That's institutionalized parasitism. And if you think that sounds harsh, ask yourself, who benefits from pretending it's about love, when in reality, it's about leverage? Here's the truth most men can't bear to face. Your wife doesn't love you for who you are. She loves you for what you do, what you provide, what you represent in terms of value, stability, and resource generation. Let that sink in. Because once you truly internalize that reality, you'll begin to see everything differently. Modern men are raised to believe in unconditional love. We're taught that if we're loyal, kind, consistent, and devoted, we will be loved in return. But the truth is harsher. Love, especially within the institution of marriage, is transactional. The moment your utility drops, The moment you can no longer perform at a certain level, or you simply stop fulfilling the functions that she's come to depend on, her emotional attachment begins to fade. You think love is an emotion, but to her subconscious, it's a contract and you'd better keep up your end of the deal. If you get sick, you become a burden. If you lose your job, you become a liability. If you get older and lose your edge, you become replaceable. And that replacement doesn't come with anger. It comes with cold, rational detachment. This is why divorce rarely happens during the height of dysfunction. It happens when she's already made the calculation, when she knows she can leave and still secure what she needs through courts, through custody, through alimony, because the family court system doesn't free the man from obligation. It just transfers the logistics. You'll no longer live in the home. You'll no longer tuck your kids in at night. You won't have a voice in her choices, but you'll still pay. Alimony, child support, asset division, monthly financial extractions with no emotional returns. She walks away with the children, the house, the sympathy. You walk away with bills, guilt, and silence. This isn't an accident. It's a system. And the brilliance of the system is how deeply it's disguised as virtue. It convinces men that staying, providing, and sacrificing, no matter how painful, is the honorable thing to do. And when it fails, society still expects you to pay because you're the man, the strong one, the dependable one, the one who never stops being useful. But let me ask you this. When did usefulness become your only form of value? When did your worth as a human being get reduced to what you produce, what you protect, and what you solve? Because make no mistake, that's what modern marriage has done. It's turned men into functions, not individuals. You're no longer a man with dreams, fears, passions, or preferences. You're a provider unit, a stability engine, a problem absorber. You exist not to be understood, but to be used. And the tragedy, you're expected to thank the system for allowing you to serve it, even when your heart breaks, even when your identity dissolves, even when your efforts go unseen. You're told real men don't complain. Real men stick it out. Real men sacrifice. But no one asks what happens to a man when all he does is sacrifice, and no one ever gives anything back. What happens when a man sacrifices everything and no one notices? What happens when he silences his thoughts, suppresses his desires, puts everyone else's needs first, and still feels like a failure? This is where the psychological damage begins, not with loud explosions, but with quiet erosion, not with a betrayal, but with the steady acceptance of being invisible. Over time, the married man learns a devastating lesson. His feelings are optional. His inner life, his dreams, his pain, his needs become secondary to maintaining peace. He stops expressing. He starts absorbing. If his wife is upset, he must fix it. If there's tension in the home, he must solve it. If the kids are struggling, he must absorb it. He becomes a buffer between everyone's chaos and the illusion of harmony. He's no longer a man. He's a pressure valve, a walking shield. An emotional shock absorber expected to take the hits without ever showing the bruises. This is not just exhausting, it's psychologically breaking, because over time, he learns a dangerous coping mechanism. Psychologists call it learned helplessness, a condition where, after repeated failures to influence an outcome, the individual stops trying altogether. Even when escape becomes possible, he no longer believes in it. Even when change is within reach, he no longer reaches for it. He becomes numb. He stops pushing back. He stops asserting himself, not out of weakness, but because experience has taught him that resistance leads to more chaos, more punishment, more conflict, more shame. So what does he do? He surrenders. He trades truth for peace. He trades voice for silence, and most tragically, he trades selfhood for stability. This, right here, is the domestic Stockholm syndrome no one talks about, where the man begins to identify with the system that exploits him. He convinces himself that this is love, that his sacrifices are noble, that discomfort is a sign of virtue, that real men should suffer for the ones they love, and society reinforces that belief. Everywhere he looks, he's told, be a good husband, put your family first, don't be selfish. The media celebrates the self-sacrificing father, the man who works 60-hour weeks, absorbs emotional stress, gives up his passions, silences his needs, and smiles through it all. Religion teaches that to be a real man is to love like Christ completely, selflessly, and without boundaries, even to the point of death. Even other men, especially married men, reinforce the illusion, because to admit the reality, to admit they feel trapped, to admit they've lost themselves in a system that doesn't love them back, would require confronting their own psychological defeat. So they smile, they joke, they say marriage is hard, but worth it. And they perpetuate the illusion that what they're living is partnership, when deep down, they know it's servitude. This is how the system survives, not through laws, not through force, but through shame, through guilt, through the internalized belief that you are a bad man if you want something for yourself. The modern man isn't just exploited economically, he's dismantled psychologically, piece by piece. The man who once had vision, fire, and direction becomes a muted version of himself, functioning, smiling, providing, but dead inside. And the world claps for him. They call him responsible. They call him a real man. But he knows somewhere, buried deep beneath the weight of his silence, he's disappeared. By now, the illusion is cracking. The man once romantic, hopeful, perhaps even naive, starts to see the truth not as betrayal, but as revelation. Because when you peel back the layers of emotional appeal, societal expectation, and romantic fantasy, you're left with something raw, unfiltered, and brutally simple. Marriage isn't about love, it's about leverage. Let that sink in. In any long-term arrangement, the person with more options always holds more power. And the truth is, modern men enter marriage with their power willingly, even eagerly, handed over. Not because they're weak, but because they were never taught the rules of the game. They believe love is enough, that being a good man will protect them, that providing will earn loyalty, that sacrifice will be reciprocated. But none of that changes the fundamental reality you can't negotiate with biology, and you can't bargain with a system designed to function without your emotional well-being in mind. Most men make the fatal mistake of believing that if they just do more, if they become more attractive, more sensitive, more giving, the imbalance will correct itself. They think they can communicate their way out of exploitation. They think love can override instinct. But that's like trying to reason with gravity. It doesn't care how nice you are. It just pulls. And what is that biological pull in women? It's the drive to secure resources, maximize benefit, and optimize her survival and that of her children. It's not evil. It's not malicious. It's simply efficient. This is why the moment you become indispensable to her lifestyle, you become dispensable as a person. She doesn't see you anymore. She sees your function, provider, protector, stability mechanism, problem solver. And once that function is no longer needed or can be better outsourced elsewhere, you are quietly removed from the system. Not with rage, not even with sadness, just cold, calculated detachment. From the outside, it still looks like marriage. But what it actually is sophisticated slavery with occasional sexual benefits. You supply the labor. You supply the emotional containment. You fund the structure, you maintain the peace, and in return, you get fleeting affection, temporary approval, and the constant pressure to stay useful at all costs. This isn't love, it's a performance contract. And if you stop performing, you're replaced. The psychological toll of this dynamic explains why married men die younger, suffer higher rates of depression, and often seem like shadows of their former selves, because they're not just tired, they're spiritually bankrupt. They're not suffering from the stress of life, they're suffering from the betrayal of meaning. They were told marriage would give their life purpose, but instead, it devoured it. They were told marriage was about unity, but instead, it became one-sided dependency. And still, society will never admit this, because the entire economic system relies on male sacrifice, on men who wake up tired, go to jobs they hate, hand over their paychecks, suppress their pain, and smile through it all. The moment a man says, "What about me?" he's labeled selfish, immature, commitment phobic, because the system can't survive self-awareness. It can't survive when men ask questions, so it drowns them in shame and trains them to feel guilty for wanting freedom. But here's the truth: they don't want you to hear. You don't need to hate women. You don't need to reject marriage. You simply need to see the contract for what it is and ask yourself if the terms serve you. Because when love becomes leverage, when affection is conditional, when your worth is measured only by your usefulness, that's not a relationship, that's a transaction. And the man who understands this is finally free to choose. What if everything you've been taught about attracting women is backwards? What if the key to unlocking real desire, genuine interest, lasting attraction isn't found in trying harder, being nicer, or giving more, but in needing less? Because here's the paradox most men never see until it's too late. The less you chase, the more you're pursued. The less emotionally invested you are up front, the more women lean in. The more sovereign and mission-focused you become, the more magnetic your presence feels. And no, this isn't manipulation, it's biology. Let's look at the men women obsess over, the ones who dominate their thoughts, inspire their effort, and keep them wondering. They're not the guys who text back instantly. They're not the ones rearranging schedules to be available. They're not the ones over-communicating, over-sharing, or over-accommodating. No, they're the men who are in motion, building, creating, leading. Focused on something bigger than romance and inviting women along for the ride, not making them the destination. You see, women aren't drawn to still water. They're drawn to the current, to the man who's going somewhere with or without them. And the more self-contained he becomes, the more valuable his attention appears. That's the law of psychological scarcity. What's rare is respected. What's always available, taken for granted. When you center your life around a woman from day one, texting her first, giving up your plans, changing your rhythm to match hers, you may think you're showing affection. But what her subconscious hears is, "This man has nothing more important than me." Why not? Her biology kicks in. Why isn't he in demand? Why isn't he being chased by other women? Why is he so emotionally available this fast? What is he hiding? Neediness, even when disguised as romance, smells like desperation. And desperation is the opposite of attraction. But flip the script. Become the man who texts when he has time, not because he's playing games, but because his time is valuable. Become the man who misses a date because he's deep into a creative project, not because he's rude, but because he's driven. Become the man who walks away when disrespect enters the room, not to punish, but because he has standards. Suddenly, the dynamic reverses. She's the one wondering. She's the one adjusting. She's the one investing. This is the role reversal nature always intended when the man stops pursuing validation and starts embodying value. Because here's the secret. Women are not consciously aware of this process. They may say they want a sensitive, emotionally available man who puts them first, but watch closely. They reward strength. They chase independence. They test for boundaries and respect the ones who hold them. Their subconscious isn't asking, "Is he nice?" It's asking, "Is he strong enough to be centered without me?" That's the evolutionary programming talking. That's what kept their ancestors safe. That's what their biology still responds to today. So no, you don't need to be cold or manipulative or aloof. You just need to be so complete that you don't seek wholeness from others. You just need to stop negotiating your identity for attention. You just need to live a life so compelling that love must earn its place inside it. When you do this, you'll witness something remarkable. She'll pursue you. She'll try to impress you. She'll work to hold your interest. Not because you played a trick, but because you finally became the man she's biologically wired to crave. And here's the real victory. Now the relationship begins on your terms. Now you choose from abundance, not from lack. Now you lead not with force, but with presence. Because the most attractive man in any room is the one who doesn't need to be there. What if I told you that the real power in relationships, any relationship, isn't in how much you're loved, but in how little you need it? This isn't about emotional detachment. It's about psychological sovereignty, the ability to stand alone, whole, complete, even when no one is watching, no one is texting, and no one is loving you back. Because the man who needs nothing is the man who commands everything. Most men today are starving for connection, not because they're weak, but because they were taught that validation equals worth. From an early age, they were conditioned to seek approval from teachers, from coaches, from parents, from women. Be a good boy, be liked, be polite, be chosen. So they grow up chasing approval in adult form affection, attention, affirmation. They hand over their identity in exchange for being wanted. They contort themselves to fit someone else's needs. And when they're left, because they always are, they shatter. Why? Because they've built no core, no inner foundation, no self separate from who they're trying to please. But here's the shift. The man who stops chasing, the man who stops seeking, the man who dares to say, "I am enough, alone." That man becomes dangerously attractive, not because he plays games, but because his peace is rare, his self-respect is unshakable, and his energy can't be manipulated. He doesn't flinch when she pulls away. He doesn't beg when attention fades. He doesn't break when love is withheld. Because he never built his castle on someone else's foundation. Instead, he pours his energy into his mission, that burning purpose that lights his soul. He cultivates his discipline, his ability to do what matters, even when it's hard. He embraces solitude not as a curse, but as the highest form of freedom. And from this space, he becomes whole. So when love comes, he welcomes it, but he doesn't need it. He engages without attaching. He gives without expecting. He loves without losing himself. This is the opposite of what most relationships look like today. Two incomplete people clinging to each other, hoping the other will fill their void. But voids don't create love. They create dependency. And dependency always leads to resentment. Because one person always ends up carrying more than the other. That's why the sovereign man stands apart. He doesn't enter relationships from scarcity. He enters from abundance, from clarity, from strength. His love is a gift, not a survival strategy. His time is precious, not freely given to all. His standards are high, not because he's arrogant, but because he knows what it costs to build himself. And here's the twist. The world will try to shame this kind of man. They'll call him selfish, cold, detached, commitment phobic. But what they're really saying is, we can't control you. We can't guilt you. We can't break you. And that's exactly the point. Because sovereignty is threatening to a system built on male compliance. But sovereignty is also freedom. Freedom to choose relationships that add value, not ones that drain it. Freedom to walk away when respect disappears. Freedom to say no without guilt. Freedom to be alone without fear. Freedom to love without losing your center. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he wrote, "The safest way of not being very miserable is not to expect to be very happy." It's not cynicism, it's clarity. It's choosing to remove the illusion that anyone else can complete you, because when you stop expecting partnership to save you, you open the door for relationships that elevate you, two whole people, choosing each other, not out of need but out of mutual recognition. That is the kind of love most men never experience, because they were too busy seeking it before they ever became someone who could truly receive it. So here's the decision. You can continue outsourcing your work, sacrificing your identity for approval, chasing love like a thirsty man crawling through a desert, or you can build something so magnetic that others chase you. You can become so full that love becomes a choice, not a necessity. You can live with so much clarity that the wrong people disqualify themselves long before they get close enough to harm you. This is the path of the sovereign man, and the cost is high, but the reward is everything. Your future self is watching.